20 Forgotten Breakfasts That Energized Black Families in the 70s. Back then, the aroma filling Black families' homes during breakfast wasn't just the smell of food. However, since then, most of these morning meals have disappeared from Black families' tables. Here are 20 breakfasts that filled Black families' homes in the 70s, but have largely disappeared from today's tables. 1. Salmon croquettes with grits and eggs. Canned salmon mixed with eggs, cornmeal, and seasonings, then fried until golden and crispy, was a breakfast staple that appeared on tables at least once a week. Mothers would open the can, drain the liquid, and mash the salmon with a fork, carefully removing any bones they found. Mixed with breadcrumbs or cracker crumbs, an egg to bind it all together, and seasonings like onion powder and black pepper, the mixture was shaped into patties and fried in hot oil until both sides were crispy. Served alongside creamy grits and scrambled or fried eggs, this breakfast was filling, affordable, and packed with protein. The smell of frying salmon filled the entire house, a scent that kids recognized immediately as they woke up. For Black families in the 1970s, salmon croquettes represented resourcefulness because canned salmon was cheaper than fresh fish, but still provided good nutrition. Grandmothers swore by this meal, claiming it gave children energy for school and kept them focused through the morning. Today, salmon croquettes have mostly disappeared from breakfast tables, replaced by faster options that don't require the time and skill this dish demanded. 2. Fried Bologna with eggs and toast. Thick slices of Bologna fried until the edges curled up and the center puffed like a bowl became a weekend breakfast treat for kids who loved the smoky, salty flavor. Mothers would slice the bologna thick, cut a small slit in the center to prevent too much curling, and fry it in a hot pan until it developed crispy, caramelized edges. The rendered fat from the bologna would then be used to fry eggs, adding extra flavor to the whole meal. Served with white bread toast and maybe some grape jelly, this breakfast was simple but satisfying. Kids loved the way the bologna curled into a bowl shape that could hold a fried egg if you were creative enough. This wasn't health food by any stretch, but it was affordable and used ingredients that were always in the house. For Black families in the 1970s, fried bologna represented making something special out of basic ingredients, turning an everyday lunch meat into a breakfast that kids actually looked forward to eating. 3. Scrapple fried until crispy. Scrapple, a mixture of pork scraps, cornmeal, and spices formed into a loaf and sliced thin, was a regional breakfast favorite in certain Black communities, especially in the Mid-Atlantic. The loaf would be sliced about half an inch thick and fried in a hot pan until both sides were deeply golden and crispy. The texture was unique, crispy on the outside but soft and almost creamy inside, with a savory pork flavor that paired perfectly with eggs and grits. Some families made their own scrapple using leftover pork from Sunday dinners, mixing it with cornmeal and seasonings, then pressing it into loaf pans to set overnight. Store-bought versions were common too, available at butcher shops and grocery stores. Scrapple required an acquired taste, and kids were often skeptical at first. But many grew to love it. For Black families who grew up eating scrapple, it represented a connection to traditions that used every part of the animal and wasted nothing. The dish has largely disappeared from modern breakfast tables, remembered now only by those who grew up with it. 4. Hot cereal made from cream of wheat or farina. Before instant oatmeal packets, hot cereal meant cooking cream of wheat or farina on the stovetop, stirring constantly to prevent lumps. Mothers would boil water or milk, slowly pour in the cereal while stirring, and cook it until it reached a thick, creamy consistency. Served hot in bowls with butter melting on top, a sprinkle of sugar or cinnamon, and sometimes a splash of milk, this breakfast warmed you from the inside out on cold mornings. Kids had mixed feelings about hot cereal because it wasn't sweet, like cold cereals advertised on TV, but it filled you up and kept you warm during the walk to school. Some families added raisins or a spoonful of jam to make it more appealing to children. Grandmothers insisted that hot cereal stuck to your ribs and gave you lasting energy, unlike sugary cereals that left you hungry an hour later. For Black families in the 1970s, hot cereal was economical comfort food that cost pennies per serving and could feed the whole family. Today, instant oatmeal has mostly replaced these slow-cooked versions, and the ritual of stirring cereal on the stove has faded. 5. Fried chicken livers with onions and eggs. Chicken livers weren't just for dinner. They appeared at breakfast tables too, soaked in milk overnight to remove any bitter taste, then dredged in seasoned flour and fried until crispy. Served with sautéed onions and scrambled eggs, this breakfast provided serious protein and iron that mothers believed kept children strong and healthy. The livers had a rich, distinctive flavor that wasn't for everyone, but families who ate them regularly appreciated their nutritional value and low cost. Butchers sold chicken livers for very little money, making them an affordable option for families feeding multiple children. Some mothers would cook the livers in gravy and serve them over grits or rice, creating a hearty breakfast that could easily be stretched to feed more people. Kids learned to eat liver without complaint because refusing food wasn't an option in most households. For Black families in the 1970s, chicken livers represented making use of ingredients that others overlooked, turning budget cuts into nourishing meals. This breakfast has almost entirely disappeared, remembered now only by adults who grew up eating it. 6. Fried apples with bacon and biscuits. Apples sliced thin and fried in bacon grease with butter, sugar, and cinnamon created a sweet and savory side dish that paired perfectly with bacon and homemade biscuits. This breakfast appeared most often in fall when apples were plentiful and inexpensive. Mothers would fry bacon first, set it aside, then use the rendered fat to cook apple slices until they softened and caramelized. The combination of sweet apples and salty bacon created a balance that made the whole meal memorable. Fresh biscuits hot from the oven soaked up the sweet apple juices and bacon grease, creating bites that were rich and satisfying. This breakfast felt special, like something served on Sunday mornings or when company stayed over. For Black families in the 1970s, fried apples represented Southern cooking traditions and the ability to create something delicious from simple, seasonal ingredients. Today, this breakfast is rarely made, replaced by faster options that don't require the time and attention that fried apples demanded. 7. Leftover cornbread, crumbled in milk. Leftover cornbread from last night's dinner became this morning's breakfast when crumbled into a bowl of cold milk. Kids would break the cornbread into chunks, pour milk over it until the bowl was full, and eat it with a spoon like cereal. The cornbread would soften slightly in the milk, creating a texture somewhere between soggy and crunchy. Some families added sugar or honey to sweeten it, while others ate it plain, enjoying the subtle sweetness of the cornbread itself. This wasn't a fancy breakfast, but it was practical and used food that might otherwise have gone stale. Mothers appreciated that it required no cooking and no cleanup beyond a bowl and spoon. For Black families in the 1970s, cornbread in milk represented resourcefulness and the refusal to waste food. It was a breakfast that filled you up and got you out the door quickly. Today's generation would probably find this combination strange, but for kids who grew up eating it, cornbread in milk was normal, comforting, and a reminder of simpler times. 8. Fried fatback with eggs and biscuits. Fatback, thick slices of pork fat, fried until crispy and golden, provided the grease for frying eggs and the meat for a filling breakfast. The fatback would render down in the hot pan, releasing its fat while the meat became crispy like thick bacon. Mothers would remove the crispy fatback, crack eggs into the grease, and fry them until the edges were lacy and brown. Biscuits soaked up the grease and egg yolk, creating rich, satisfying bites. This breakfast was heavy and definitely not what modern nutritionists would recommend, but it kept working men and active children fueled through physically demanding days. Fatback was inexpensive and available at any butcher or grocery store, making it accessible to families on tight budgets. For Black families in the 1970s, fatback represented making use of ingredients that provided maximum calories and flavor for minimum cost. This breakfast has largely disappeared as dietary preferences shifted away from heavy, fatty morning meals. 9. Hominy grits with butter and salt. While regular grits were common, hominy grits had a distinct texture and slightly different flavor that some families preferred. These grits were made from corn that had been treated with lye, creating larger, chewier kernels. Cooked low and slow with plenty of water, butter, and salt, hominy grits became creamy and rich. Served as a side to eggs, bacon, or sausage, they provided bulk that filled everyone up without costing much. Some families ate their grits with sugar, making them sweet instead of savory, a choice that sparked debates about the right way to eat grits. Kids grew up with strong opinions based on how their families prepared them. For Black families in the 1970s, hominy grits represented Southern heritage and breakfast traditions that connected them to generations past. While regular grits are still eaten today, hominy grits have become less common, harder to find in stores, and mostly forgotten by younger generations. 10. Pan-fried sausage links with pancakes. Breakfast sausage links fried in a cast-iron skillet until browned and crispy, then served alongside a stack of pancakes with syrup, created the perfect sweet and savory combination. Mothers would fry the sausages first, letting them cook slowly so the fat rendered out and the casings got crispy. The sausage grease would then be used to cook pancakes on the same skillet, adding extra flavor to each one. Kids loved cutting their pancakes and sausages together, getting bites that combined maple syrup with savory pork. This breakfast appeared most often on weekend mornings when there was time to cook something special. The sausages weren't fancy, usually the affordable links from the grocery store, but they tasted special when fried right and served with fluffy pancakes. For Black families in the 1970s, this breakfast represented weekend leisure and the luxury of a slow morning meal eaten together. Today, frozen pancakes and microwaved sausages have replaced this from-scratch version, and the ritual of cooking them together in the same pan has faded. 11. Fried pork chops with grits and eggs. Thin pork chops, seasoned and fried until golden, weren't just for dinner. They appeared at breakfast tables too, providing serious protein to start the day. Mothers would season the pork chops with salt, pepper, and garlic powder, dredge them in flour, and fry them in hot oil until both sides were crispy and the meat was cooked through. Served with creamy grits and eggs fried in the pork chop grease, this breakfast fueled men heading to physically demanding jobs and children facing long school days. The pork chops were usually bone-in, and kids learned to eat around the bone, getting every bit of meat. This wasn't a delicate breakfast. It was substantial, filling, and showed that Black families didn't draw strict lines between breakfast foods and dinner foods. If it was filling and affordable, it worked for the morning meal. For Black families in the 1970s, fried pork chops for breakfast represented practicality and the understanding that breakfast needed to provide real sustenance. This practice has mostly disappeared as breakfast has become lighter and quicker. 12. Biscuits and chocolate gravy. Chocolate gravy wasn't gravy at all, but a sweet sauce made from cocoa powder, sugar, flour, and milk, cooked until thick and poured over hot biscuits. This breakfast was a special treat, usually appearing on weekend mornings or when mothers wanted to make something that felt indulgent without costing much. The gravy was dark and rich, similar to hot chocolate, but thicker, and it soaked into the biscuits, creating a dessert-like breakfast that kids absolutely loved. The ingredients were pantry staples that every household had, making this an affordable way to create something that felt special. Some families added vanilla or a touch of cinnamon to their chocolate gravy, developing their own unique version. For Black families in the 1970s, chocolate gravy represented creativity in the kitchen and the ability to make children happy with simple, inexpensive ingredients. This breakfast has largely disappeared, remembered fondly by those who grew up eating it, but rarely made anymore. 13. Fried bologna and egg sandwiches. Thick-cut bologna fried and placed between white bread with a fried egg and maybe some cheese created a handheld breakfast that kids could eat quickly before running out the door. Mothers would fry the bologna first, creating those characteristic curled edges, then fry an egg in the same pan. Everything got stacked on soft white bread, sometimes with a slice of American cheese that melted from the heat. This sandwich was filling, portable, and used ingredients that were always available. Kids ate these sandwiches while watching Saturday morning cartoons or while walking to school. The combination of runny egg yolk, salty Bologna, and soft bread created a messy but satisfying breakfast. For Black families in the 1970s, this sandwich represented practical breakfast solutions for busy mornings when sitting down to a full meal wasn't possible. While breakfast sandwiches are still popular today, they're usually from fast food restaurants rather than made at home with fried Bologna. 14. Mush with butter and syrup. Cornmeal mush, also called cornmeal porridge, was a hot breakfast made by cooking cornmeal in water or milk until it thickened into a creamy consistency. Served hot with butter melting on top and maple syrup or molasses drizzled over it, mush was simple, filling, and incredibly cheap to make. The texture was smooth and slightly grainy, similar to grits, but made from regular cornmeal. Some families let leftover mush cool and solidify, then sliced it and fried the slices for breakfast the next day, creating crispy cakes that were delicious with syrup. Mush appeared most often during winter months, when hot breakfasts were especially welcome. Kids didn't always love mush because it wasn't sweet like cold cereals, but they ate it because it was what was served. For Black families in the 1970s, mush represented Depression-era cooking knowledge passed down through generations, a breakfast that cost almost nothing, but kept everyone fed. This dish has almost completely disappeared from modern breakfast tables. 15. Fried Spam with eggs and toast. Spam, sliced thick and fried until the edges caramelized, became a salty, savory breakfast meat that paired well with eggs and toast. The canned meat was affordable, had a long shelf life, and could be kept in the pantry until needed. Mothers would open the can, slice the Spam about half an inch thick, and fry it in a hot pan until both sides were golden brown. The rendered fat from the Spam would then be used to fry eggs, adding extra flavor. Served with white toast and maybe some grape jelly, this breakfast was simple but satisfying. Kids had mixed feelings about Spam, with some loving it and others finding it too salty or strange. For Black families in the 1970s, Spam represented affordable protein and convenience during times when money was especially tight. While Spam still exists today, it's rarely eaten for breakfast anymore, having been replaced by other quick protein options. 16. Oatmeal with butter and brown sugar. Real oatmeal, not instant packets, meant rolled oats cooked on the stovetop with water or milk until they became creamy and tender. Mothers would stand at the stove stirring the pot, making sure the oatmeal didn't stick or burn. Served in bowls with a pat of butter melting in the center and brown sugar sprinkled on top, this breakfast was warm, comforting, and nutritious. Some families added raisins, cinnamon, or a splash of vanilla to make it more flavorful. The oatmeal cooked slowly, filling the kitchen with a wholesome, slightly nutty smell. Kids learned to eat it even if they preferred sugary cereals because mothers insisted oatmeal was better for them and would keep them full longer. For Black families in the 1970s, real oatmeal represented proper nutrition and the time mothers took to prepare breakfasts from scratch. Today, instant oatmeal packets have mostly replaced this slower version, and the ritual of stirring oats on the stove has become rare. 17. Fried chicken gizzards with rice and gravy. Chicken gizzards cleaned and seasoned, then fried or simmered in gravy, sometimes appeared at breakfast tables alongside rice or grits. This breakfast was more common in Southern households where no part of the chicken went to waste. The gizzards required careful preparation, cleaning away the tough membrane before cooking. Once prepared, they could be fried crispy or cooked low and slow in gravy until tender. Served over rice with the gravy soaking in, this breakfast was filling and provided substantial protein. Kids learned to chew gizzards carefully because they were tougher than regular chicken meat. The flavor was rich and distinctly chicken, but more intense. For Black families in the 1970s, eating gizzards for breakfast represented resourcefulness and the cultural practice of using every part of the animal. This breakfast has almost entirely disappeared, with gizzards now rarely eaten at all, let alone for the morning meal. 18. Fried sweet potatoes with bacon. Sweet potatoes sliced into rounds and fried in bacon grease until caramelized on the edges created a sweet and savory breakfast side that paired beautifully with eggs and bacon. Mothers would slice the sweet potatoes about half an inch thick, fry bacon first, then use the rendered fat to cook the sweet potato rounds until they were tender inside and crispy outside. The natural sweetness of the potatoes intensified with cooking, and the bacon grease added a salty depth that created perfect balance. This breakfast appeared most often when sweet potatoes were in season and inexpensive. Some families sprinkled a little brown sugar on the sweet potatoes while they cooked, making them even sweeter. Kids loved the combination of flavors and textures, and the bright orange color made the plate look appealing. For Black families in the 1970s, fried sweet potatoes represented Southern cooking traditions and making use of seasonal vegetables. This breakfast is rarely made today, replaced by faster options that don't require the time and attention that proper frying demands. 19. Buttermilk biscuits with sausage gravy. Homemade buttermilk biscuits split open and covered with thick, creamy sausage gravy made from pan drippings, flour, and milk created one of the most filling and comforting breakfasts possible. Mothers would make biscuits from scratch early in the morning, mixing flour, buttermilk, butter, and baking powder by hand, then cutting out rounds and baking them until golden. While the biscuits baked, they'd fry breakfast sausage, remove it from the pan, and use the rendered fat to make gravy, whisking in flour and milk until it thickened. The finished gravy was poured generously over split biscuits, with crumbled sausage mixed in. This breakfast stuck to your ribs and kept you full until dinner. It appeared most often on weekend mornings when there was time to cook from scratch. For Black families in the 1970s, biscuits and gravy represented Southern heritage and the comfort of homemade food. While this breakfast still exists in some regions, homemade versions have become rare, replaced by restaurant versions or frozen biscuits that don't taste the same. 20. Livermush fried until crispy. Livermush, similar to Scrapple but made with pork liver, cornmeal, and spices, was a regional breakfast specialty in certain Southern Black communities. The loaf would be sliced thin and fried in a hot pan until both sides were deeply browned and crispy. The flavor was distinctly liver, not for everyone, but those who grew up eating it developed a taste for its unique richness. Served with eggs, grits, or biscuits, Livermush provided substantial protein for very little money. Some families made their own livermush using leftover pork and liver from butchering, mixing it with cornmeal and seasonings, then pressing it into loaf pans. Store-bought versions were available too, usually at local butcher shops. Kids had strong opinions about livermush, either loving it or hating it, with no middle ground. For Black families in the 1970s, livermush represented regional food traditions and the practice of using every part of the animal. This breakfast has largely disappeared, difficult to find even in regions where it was once common. These 20 breakfasts tell the story of how Black families started their days in the 1970s with food that was affordable, filling, and tied to traditions passed down through generations. These weren't convenient meals grabbed on the way out the door. They required time, skill, and the knowledge that proper breakfast meant sitting down together, even if just for a few minutes before everyone scattered. The smells, flavors, and rituals of these morning meals shaped childhoods and created memories that lasted a lifetime. Today, many of these breakfasts have vanished, replaced by cereal boxes, toaster pastries, and drive-through breakfast sandwiches. But for those who remember waking up to the smell of salmon croquettes frying or biscuits baking, these breakfasts represent something irreplaceable. They were the taste of home, the feeling of being cared for, and the knowledge that no matter what the day brought, you started it with a full stomach and your family around you. Which of these forgotten breakfasts do you remember? Drop a comment and share the morning meals that filled your childhood home.